afternoon, Federal Reserve. How may I help you?
Is the Federal Reserve owned by the U.S. government?
No, actually, the Federal Reserve is a private company comprised of shareholders.
That's what I thought.
Is there anything else I can help you with?
Thanks for answering my question.
Let's start our journey and take a look at the largest shareholder of the Federal Reserve. We arrive in Frankfurt, Germany, known for their great sausage, best beer in the world, home of the Oktoberfest, and also the banking capital of Europe. But first, let's take a look at how banking first got started.
Most of us believe that banks lend out money that has been entrusted to them by depositors. Easy to picture, but not the truth. In fact, banks create the money they loan, not from the bank's own earnings, not from the money deposited, but directly from the borrower's promise to repay. The borrower's signature on the loan papers is an obligation to pay the bank the amount of the loan plus interest, or lose the house, the car, whatever asset was pledged as collateral. That's a big commitment from the borrower. What does the same signature require of the bank? The bank gets to conjure into existence the amount of the loan and just write it into the borrower's account. Sound far-fetched? Surely that can't be true. But it is. Goldsmiths made trade much easier by casting coins, standardized units of these metals whose weight and purity was certified. Well, to protect his gold, the goldsmith needed a vault, and soon his fellow townsmen were knocking on his door, wanting to rent space to safeguard their own coins and valuables. Before long, the goldsmith was renting every shelf in the vault and earning a small income from his vault rental business. Years went by, and the goldsmith made an astute observation. Depositors rarely came in to remove their actual physical gold, and they never all came in at once. That was because the claim checks the goldsmith had written as receipts for the gold were being traded in the marketplace as if they were the gold itself. This paper money was far more convenient than heavy coins, and amounts could simply be written instead of laboriously counted one by one for each transaction. Meanwhile, the goldsmith had another business. He lent out his gold, charging interest. Well, as convenient claim check money came into acceptance, borrowers began asking for their loans in the form of these claim checks instead of the actual metal. As industry expanded, more and more people asked the goldsmith for loans. This gave the goldsmith an even better idea. He knew that very few of his depositors ever removed their actual gold, so the goldsmith figured he could easily get away with lending out claim checks against his depositors' gold in addition to his own. As long as the loans were repaid, his depositors would be none the wiser and no worse off, and the goldsmith, now more banker than artisan, would make a far greater profit than he could by lending only his own gold. For years, the goldsmith secretly enjoyed a good income from the interest earned on everybody else's deposits. Now a prominent lender, he grew steadily richer than his fellow townsmen, and he flaunted it. Suspicions grew that he was spending his depositors' money. His depositors got together and threatened withdrawal of their gold if the goldsmith didn't come clean about his newfound wealth. Contrary to what one might expect, this did not turn out to be a disaster for the goldsmith. Despite the duplicity inherent in his scheme, his idea did work. The depositors had not lost anything. Their gold was all safe in the goldsmith's vault. Well, rather than taking back their gold, the depositors demanded that the goldsmith, now their banker, cut them in by paying them a share of the interest. And that was the beginning of banking. The banker paid a low interest rate on deposits of other people's money that he then loaned out at a higher interest. The difference covered the bank's cost of operation and its profit. The logic of this system was simple, and it seemed like a reasonable way to satisfy the demand for credit. However, this is not the way banking works today. Our goldsmith banker was not content with the income remaining after sharing the interest earnings with his depositors, and the demand for credit was growing fast as Europeans spread out across the world. But his loans were limited by the amount of gold his depositors had in his vault. That's when he got an even bolder idea. Since no one but himself knew what was actually in his vaults, he could lend out claim checks on gold that wasn't even there. As long as all the claim check holders didn't come to the vault at the same time and demand real gold, how would anyone find out? This new scheme worked very well, and the banker became enormously wealthy on the interest paid on gold that did not exist. The idea that the banker would just create money out of nothing was too outrageous to believe, so for a long time the thought did not occur to people. But the power to just invent money went to the banker's head, as you can well imagine. In time, the magnitude of the banker's loans and his ostentatious wealth did trigger suspicions once again. Some borrowers started to demand real gold instead of paper representations. Rumors spread. Suddenly, several wealthy depositors showed up to remove their gold. The game was up. A sea of claim check holders flooded the street outside the closed doors of the bank. Alas, the banker did not have enough gold and silver to redeem all the paper he had put into their hands. This is called a run on the bank, and it is what every banker dreads.
As we walk through Frankfurt, we are surrounded by many banks who use the same method the goldsmith used, which is now known as fractional lending. But gold isn't even used to back the paper these days. This method is enslaving our children and our children's children. One particular bank of interest, which is very low-key in appearance, it has a road, a park, and statues dedicated to the banking family. The Rothschild Bank is located across from the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. Incredibly, we got access to the Rothschild Bank, but unfortunately a request for an interview fell on deaf ears. How did this banking family get started? Established in Europe in the late 18th century, huge amounts of wealth were created, and leaving a dynasty of banking heirs around the world, which would make the billionaires of today seem like they were on food stamps. On his deathbed, he said, "Remember, my children, that all the earth must belong to us Jews, and that the Gentiles, being mere excrements of animals, must possess nothing." I can think of a few other things that I might say on my deathbed, but it brings up a very important point, in which we must understand that Jews and Zionists are two very different people. Zionist bankers financed the war and exterminated their own people for profit. Hi, Ziggy.
How are you today?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
Very good, very good.
Did you have a chance to look at the car?
Yeah, we got it all ready for you.
Okay, do you think it can go the distance?
It definitely will go the distance.
Thanks. Located in Rougemont, Quebec, is a small journal that has been reporting on Zionist banking systems for the last 30 years. We had a chance to speak to some of their representatives.
Of course, that journal at hand here, those two presidents are very well known. It's Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. So people, they know about both were assassinated. That's the official story, but most people don't know why they were assassinated. We feel the reason why they were assassinated is because both of them, they created their own debt-free currency. As the head of state, they knew they had the power, according to the US Constitution, to create debt-free money for America. That's what Lincoln did, and that's what Kennedy did. But for Lincoln, it's well documented. He was assassinated by people hired by the Rothschilds in Europe. Because Lincoln, he had to finance the Civil War, the North against the South. So he went to the bankers of the North, and they said to him, war is a risky business. We will lend you that money, but at 24% interest. So he said, that's a ripoff. You profit of that situation because we're at war. You're not helping me. So they said to him, well, if you don't like it, you can always go to the South and ask the bankers of the South. Maybe they will charge you more or less, we don't know. So he said, maybe I have no choice. And one of his advisors said to him, well, look at the Constitution. It's right there. You have the power to create your own money, interest-free. So that's what he did. He called them the greenbacks because it was printed with the green ink at the back. So they printed over $450 million worth of greenbacks, and they saved a huge amount of interest. Like they say, if America had to borrow that same amount, billions and billions of dollars in interest. And Kennedy, he knew about the Constitution just as well as Lincoln did, and he issued in 1962, he issued an executive order to create some United States notes instead of Federal Reserve notes. And a few weeks after that, he was shot, and the money was withdrawn from circulation by order of the next president, Lyndon Johnson. So those bankers, they knew what they were doing when they ordered those two presidents to be assassinated. People, they have to know the banks, they can lend at least 10 times the amount of deposits they have. Actually, they lend money they don't have. If tomorrow morning everyone goes to the bank to withdraw their money, there will be not enough money for everyone because that money does not exist in the first place.
In our journey, it just so happened that we ran into a fellow that had his own ideas about liberty, taxation, and the banking system.
Sum it up, all of my heart is from what we're doing is we're a ministry out there going, seeking to save that which is lost. Everybody likes to sit in their church and not do anything about it. We need to do something with this tyrannical government that's coming in trying to take away our rights. You guys out there, we need to get out there and stand for something. We have a saying in the ministry, if you don't stand for something, you fall for everything. And that's what they're doing is they're taking away our rights, they're taking away our freedoms. This is supposed to be one nation under God, but they're trying to take away that with all their agendas that they have out there nowadays. It's all about the money and not one nation under God, which this nation is supposed to be. So we all need to do something. The heart of our ministry is you can run, but you cannot hide. Your sin will find you out before God. In America, our sin is finding us out. We're about the money and not about God and seek and save Him what He would have us to do. And that's our heart, is we need to do something, get out there out of our churches and out of our house pews and go out and seek and save that which is lost. And take away not let them take away our freedoms, which they're trying to do nowadays. Well, yeah, I see the tax system, it's been really brought down nowadays. I mean, they're really taking away the money from the people, not let us go nowhere in life. What they do nowadays with the taxes and all the things, if you look down the history in the course of this nation, why did we leave Great Britain and all these places? We left Great Britain because of heavy taxation without representation. And that's exactly what our corrupt government is doing nowadays. They're taxing us without representation. We don't have any say from it. They just keep taking away our money. They keep taking the money without giving us any say in the taxes nowadays. I mean, they're taking away our money from not letting anybody get anywhere in life, you know? So they're really, I'm not down for the taxes and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of stuff you can do to not pay it, because you don't have to pay it if you do it the right way. We're setting up trusts and that kind of stuff, so you put all your money in that, but you shouldn't have to pay taxes. I mean, why'd they have the Boston Tea Party? That was because of taxes and all that kind of stuff. You know, we need to get back to what we were founded on, this nation.
Traveling across the country, we arrive in sunny San Francisco, home of the 49ers, where we hear from an ex-IRS agent.
Well, I've been working as a revenue officer, tax collector for the IRS for 10 years, from 87 till 97. Early in 1997, I had somebody give me some information and ask for me to evaluate it, and somewhat grudgingly, I decided to go ahead and do that. And I did it knowing that I was doing the job, that I was right as far as being on the side of the law. that everybody knows you have to pay your taxes. And so I really thought I was just going through the motions to humor this person. And but I decided when I undertook it that I would be open-minded to the best of my ability, and that I would try to be thorough and accurate, do a good job. So I went off to read the tax code, big thick books that were sitting on my desk that, by the way, I never had to read while I was on the job, because agents use procedures, manuals, and guidelines of how to do their job. They don't actually have to flip through the tax code, a law book, to do their job on a daily basis. So I'm going through the tax code book, reading it specifically like I've never read it before, to see if the words really say what people are saying that they say. And then that leads you to definitions in the tax code book, legal meanings of certain words. You know, to you and me on the street, employer means one thing or means different things to different people. But in the tax code, in the law book, employer has a specific legal meaning, just like so does employee, and so does person, and so does taxpayer. And so I'm reading these things, and then I'm moving on from the tax code to the regulations, to court cases, and to books, and then interviewing people in the so-called tax movement who have written books and who speak and teach about different things. So as this several month process got underway, I started getting information that pointed to the fact that the so-called tax protesters were more right than they were wrong. Now, with this different information in my brain here from all the studying I've done, I have a real problem here. Do I keep collecting my paycheck for another several years and get my pension and retire and pretend that I didn't learn the truth about the income tax? Or what do I do? And I decided I needed to resign, because every day my job as an enforcement agent involved filing notices of lien to tie people's property up so that they couldn't sell it without getting their taxes paid, levy their pay, levy their bank accounts, make seizures, take their vehicle away. You know, people know that with the paper money that is not backed by anything, that it's easy to have this money be inflated, and to where, like in Germany around World War II time, you know, people were needing a wheelbarrow full of money to buy a loaf of bread or something. That could happen with this money if it wasn't for the Federal Reserve literally managing and manipulating things to keep money from inflating to such a degree like that. Well, the income tax is instrumental in helping pull large amounts of revenue out of the system to prevent the money from being worth less than it already is, in spite of their efforts.
The Federal Reserve is a private cartel of separate commercial banks, and it started out that way. It was basically manipulated into existence by Senator Aldrich in 1913, and the ability to create that money out of thin air has been used as a means to control all the financial institutions, to make them basically illegal tax collectors. All of the taxes we had were on imports. They were collected from ships coming in across the oceans, and we had a Coast Guard that made sure that the people driving the ships in paid their fair share. The inflation is a method of robbery from the government. If the government prints too much, they reduce the value of the money in circulation, and therefore they rob from the people who have existing currency. Because the purpose for having an IRS is to stabilize the economy and take excess fiat currency out of circulation, they will not cooperate with you. The income tax system we have is maintained primarily through fraud. When the IRS wants to wrongfully collect funds from a person, they will send a notice of levy. It's called a 668Y CDO. They will send a notice of levy to an employer, and a private employer, not a federal employer, and they will claim that this person owes funds to the IRS, and that form, on the back of the form, will have a citation from the Internal Revenue Code, and it will cite 26 U.S.C. 6331, Part A, is always missing from that form. I have a copy of it. Federal income tax, because there is no constitutional way to implement a tax upon Americans living in the states, our federal government has basically fooled people, and what we really have is not a tax. What we have is a federal employee kickback program. And the way that works is, and it started during the Civil War to pay for the Civil War, what they did is they passed a tax on elected or appointed officers of the United States government. And if you look in the statutes at large during that period, you'll see very clearly that it was instituted only on officers of the government. And they named those people employees. And the reason they call it an income tax return is because it is a return of federal property. The real taxpayers under our Constitution are foreigners, all of them. The only taxpayers are people who are driving ships or flying planes into our country, who are importing goods, and because they're doing that, because the process of importation is a privileged activity, and because excise taxes are taxes on privileges, the only taxpayers are people living in other countries who want to bring goods into our country. I wouldn't say it's safe to say that anyone in this country currently pays a real tax. So in that sense, I didn't stop paying anything because I was never paying a tax. I was paying a bribe to a public official for the privilege of being left alone by a criminal organization called the Illegal Robbery Squad. That's what I was really paying. So did I stop paying taxes? No, because I was never paying them to begin with. I stopped paying extortion money and bribery money is what I did. Start obeying the real laws that we have, which do not include our tax code, because it's not a law. The way to get left alone, as I said before, is to make sure you get educated. That's the most important thing. If they know that you know that what they are doing is not only morally wrong, but illegal and fraudulent, if you can express that very clearly to them, then they'll pretty much leave you alone. Do your homework, and that's how you stay out of trouble. And even if there is a temporary cost over the long haul, our children and our children's children will be blessed. And that's what this whole country was based on, was freedom and personal responsibility and truth and honesty. Well, the Supreme Court said in our country the people are the sovereigns. They're in charge, and they can change the government whenever they want. And the only reason they don't, the only reason, is because they put personal security and safety and materialism ahead of truth, justice, and freedom. If we just had 3% of those people, and those people were willing to do whatever it took to do the right thing, and especially demand to be thrown in jail. I no longer file W-4s because I'm a non-resident alien, a national, and a non-taxpayer. And so that's part of the process of extracting yourself from the system, is making sure that you file the correct paperwork. Filing nothing will usually get you in trouble, but if you file the correct paperwork and change your status before you extract yourself from the system, then you can stay out of you're more likely to stay out of harm's way. Under our system of law, which is unique throughout the world, our federal government is separate and distinct from the governments of the states. The federal law is foreign with respect to state law. The jurisdiction of the courts is foreign between federal government and the state government. Because it's foreign, then the people who are born in the states are considered to be nationals. When they go overseas, that's what they call them, American nationals.
As we arrive in Texas, we have to understand that Texas has produced some staunch opponents of the Federal Reserve, and these two congressmen are no exception, Wright Patman and Ron Paul.
I hate to interrupt, but my time is about up. But I would like to suggest that you say it's not spending money. Well, it's money out of thin air. You put it into the market, and you hold assets, and the assets aren't, they are diminishing in value when you buy up bad assets. But very quickly, if you could answer another question, because I'm curious about this. The price of gold today is $1,580. The dollar during these last 3 years was devalued almost 50%. When you wake up in the morning, do you care about the price of gold?
Well, I pay attention to the price of gold, but I think it reflects a lot of things. It reflects global uncertainties. I think the reason people hold gold is as a protection against what we call tail risk, really, really bad outcomes. And to the extent that the last few years have made people more worried about the potential of a major crisis, then they have gold as a protection.
Do you think gold is money?
No.
It's not money. Even if it had been money for 6,000 years, somebody reversed that and eliminated that economic law.
Well, it's an asset. I mean, it's the same. Would you say Treasury bills are money? I don't think they're money either, but they're a financial asset.
Why do central banks hold it?
Well, it's a form of reserves.
Why don't they hold diamonds?
Well, it's tradition, long-term tradition.
Well, some people still think it's money. I yield back. My time is up. Thank you.
There is another unsung hero of the movement. He has blown the whistle for a very long time.
Well, a lot of people think of secret societies as like witches and warlocks and something medieval, something that's kind of a conspiracy theory, like ghosts and goblins. But it's not. Really, information has always been power. And so information is always protected by elites. And what we think of as secret societies from 500 years ago or 200 years ago were simply intelligence agencies. Just like we have the CIA in the United States, or they have MI5 or MI6 in England, or they have the Mossad in Israel, or the FSB in Russia today, which of course was the KGB, their internal police, their GRU. Well, 200, 300 years ago, the elites had intelligence agencies and networks and spies as well, and they call those secret societies. And here in the United States, we have Skull and Bones, founded in the 1830s by the Russell Trust, admittedly with opium money from the British East India Company, and even MSNBC in our nation, now admits something that was conspiracy theory just a few years ago, that opium money did found it, that it is a U.S. branch of the German Illuminati that was founded in 1776. And so what you have here is Skull and Bones with three presidents, George Bush, George Bush's father, George Herbert Walker Bush, and William Taft at the turn of the last century. Those three presidents. And then innumerable secretaries of states, the heads of major publishing empires like William F. Buckley, a lot of your different CIA directors, all of those individuals were Skull and Bones. But Skull and Bones is only chapter 322. It's a chapter. And they admit that they were founded off of a German cult, which is the Illuminati. And then by the turn of the last century, by 1900, people like Taft and others were actually traveling by train across the United States to Northern California to attend a place called Bohemian Grove, which I was the first person to ever sneak into back in July of 2000. And it had been rumored they did these bizarre rituals and worship the Canaanite deity Moloch. And then indeed, when I snuck in, on the night when they were rumored to kick the whole 15-day celebration off, there was the large idol and the whole ceremony going on with our world leaders in black and red robes, with a high priest leading them in a mock human sacrifice of a child. And so people say, well, there's lots of groups. Which group is in control? Well, you see top globalist leaders attending and being involved with every one of these groups, and then you find out that really they're all just satellites of the mothership. It's all one organization, one group. But yes, banks and bankers are always at the head of the New World Order. Whatever area of the world you're looking at, whatever sub-directorate or group, because they do something called fractional reserve banking. Because the Federal Reserve System in my country and the private central banks of almost every other country are owned by just a few families. And people think that they're governmental, but it's Federal Reserve in name only, just like Federal Express has federal in its name, or Federal Credit Union. We think of it as credible and strong and why it's federal, but it's not federal. There are hundreds of companies out there with the name's federal in them, and they're no more federal than you or I are. So yes, at the top of it, it always leads back to banks, because that's really where the elite got their power. In that they own the printing presses, they own the money. People always say, man, the elite, they're in this for money. Well, not really in the way most people think of them being in this for money. Yes, they're in it for money. They're in it to maintain control of the government through control of the money supply. They issue the money. They print the money. They have a deal with Congress through the 1913 Federal Reserve Act and a deal with the Treasury where they come to them and ask them to issue money, and then interest is created on that money. And then the Federal Reserve is in this key position of power. But when the Federal Reserve does make a profit off of printing the money, they actually give it back to Congress. And so you're saying, well, then how do they make money? Well, this is how they make money. Now they have the power to inflate or deflate the money supply. They have inside knowledge on stock deals and on derivatives and on key commodities like pork bellies or gold. So they really control the market. But where they really make the money, and they actually do print it, where they really get the power is with fractional reserve banking, because then this handful of banks that are shareholders in the private run-for-profit Federal Reserve, they have the deal with Congress where they can print as much money as they want, and then they can take that money when you put $100 in the bank, and they can loan out 9 times that. Or they can loan out that original dollar you put in the bank, and then they can loan out 9 more of those, so a total of 10. And they're allowed to go up to 20, 30, 50, even 100 times that. But they generally keep it at about 9 or 10 times. And so they print money up out of nothing. They got a bunch of zeros and ones in their computer system, and then you come and pledge your house and your collateral and everything to pay off this loan. Meanwhile, they just made it out of nothing. Why do you think that once you make money, you don't get a credit card every week in the mail? But back when I was in college and didn't have any money, I got credit cards every week in the mail. Because it's about getting you in debt. It's about controlling you. They print the money. They own and basically run it all. It's all about a consolidation now. And it's about our minds. It's about controlling the media and the curriculum. Really, they control the currency. And so with that currency, they control the entire society. And they control all the credit. And so they're able to totally dominate society.
South Carolina in 1767. He was orphaned by the time he was 14. Came here in 1788. Basically a lawyer. He was appointed prosecuting attorney for the Miro District of North Carolina, and that was this area of Tennessee. Came here with his horse, a racehorse, and a suitcase full of items. And by the time he had been here 6 years, he had more cases on the Davidson County Court docket than any other attorney in this area. So he was a pretty good attorney. And then he married well. He married the daughter of one of the founding families of Nashville and became involved in real estate, the buying and selling of. His biographer estimates that he made over $100,000 in his lifetime just in the buying and selling of real estate alone. His accomplishments are varied. He's most remembered for the Bank Act, or the refusal to recharter the Second Bank of the United States in 1831, and the Indian removal policy. Both of those were very controversial. The refusal to recharter the bank was strictly a political issue. It turned out to be the correct one because the people of the United States elected him for a second term, voicing their approval of what he had done. The unfortunate thing is that he did not have a plan for replacing the Second Bank of the United States, and there was conflict within the economy because of that. The United States had banking problems for almost 100 years after Andrew Jackson until the Federal Reserve System was founded. The Second Bank of the United States received the deposits of the U.S. Treasury and then loaned it out to local banks or state banks, and they did not pay any interest on the money. Andrew Jackson felt like that put them in a position where they could manipulate the national economy and create havoc within it if they wanted to. He withdrew the deposits of the United States from the bank and put them into state banks. What he had predicted proved to be true because the president of the bank, Nicholas Biddle, was able to manipulate the economy, calling in loan notes from other banks that sent the country into a depression. And the country suffered dearly for it in the late 1830s, and Van Buren paid a political price for it. The Treasury system really developed under Van Buren. At the time, the Bank of the United States, Second Bank, was privately held. The second thing that Andrew Jackson did was put in a Specie Act that only land could be bought with gold or coinage. They couldn't buy with paper money. And that put a lot of the banks in a bad situation because they'd been printing their own paper money. And they couldn't support it. When the notes were called in for coinage, and they wouldn't accept the banknotes that the banks had printed. With them on the day that the assassination attempt was made was his Secretary of the Treasury, Levi Woodbury, who witnessed it. The man fired once, the gun misfired, he pulled a second pistol and fired, and it too misfired. When they reloaded them later and fired them, they worked perfectly. So it was apparently an act of providence that saved Andrew Jackson that day.
The failed assassination of Andrew Jackson was backed by the Zionist bankers.
A Verichip is a small, tiny almost, microchip about the size of a grain of rice that contains a unique ID number, 16 digits to be exact, and it's implanted subcutaneously in a very simple outpatient procedure. Then once the Verichip is under the skin, it can be scanned with our proprietary scanner, and the scanner links that unique ID number to a secure database. Our sister company, Digital Angel, has used a similar microchip in locating and identifying companion pets, livestock, and fish for a number of years. And one of our physicians that worked with the company was struck by what occurred in 9/11 and how difficult it was to identify people once they were either found or went back into the wreckage. And that was part of sort of a company brainstorm about how this chip could be used in humans to potentially save lives or connect people to a database of important information such as medical or healthcare records. Well, it is secure because if you think about it as being tamper-proof and under your skin, unlike an insurance card or a credit card that could be lost or stolen from your wallet, that ID number is secure under your skin. And it takes one of our proprietary scanners, such as this Verichip handheld scanner, to actually read the information and then link via serial port to the database, which, as you mentioned, the database is secure, password protected. The Verichip is a passive RFID device, so there's no power source associated with the chip. It responds to the energy that comes from the scanner.
Are you chipped?
I'm not. I think I'm scheduled next time around.
Okay. In 1913, the Federal Reserve Act was created on Jekyll Island.
A group of millionaires, about 53 of them actually members. Rockefellers, Morgans, Vanderbilts, Pulitzers, the Goulds, the Astors, the McCormicks. Henry Ford was on this island. William McKinley, President William McKinley was on this island. Lots of banking, lots of railroad, Pullman, Stillman, and of course J.P. Morgan is one of my personal favorites. That bought the island from John Eugene Dominion. He had control of the island and sold it. He knew he'd make more money selling it to a group of people rather than one private person. So with his friend Newton Finney, Newton Finney went to West Point. He didn't graduate, but he went to West Point, and he got to rub elbows with a lot of the influential millionaires in the Union Club, the most prestigious club in America at that time. The Federal Reserve was, how should I say, the foundation or the formation of the Federal Reserve was here under the disguise of a duck hunt. They came here because of the Pujo Committee. They had to act fast, and there was a crash of 1907. So they wanted to stabilize the economy. So they came here under the disguise of a duck hunt, and it was during off season, and you had to be invited here, or you don't step foot on Jekyll. So these gentlemen, money brains of Wall Street came here and built the formation of what later became the Federal Reserve, and that was in 1910 in November, and they were here for about 10 days.
Well, first of all, for credibility's sake, I'd like to let people know that I'm not just an employee that was disgruntled or got fired. First award that I got was when I first started back in 1988, and it's a fraud award, the Georgia Fraud Award. So I got that my first year at the IRS. The next one I got was from inspection, and I had bribery cases where I had to get wired up and have wires in my bra straps and whatnot. And also, the biggest one here that I have is from the commissioner of the IRS himself. Back then it was Fred T. Goldberg, so I got this award from the IRS commissioner in Washington. Well, between the Constitution, the codes, which is the federal codes, and the Supreme Court, if you look back into all that and do the research, you will find that a man's wage is not to be taxed. It's the foreigners, the foreign corporations, non-resident alien, for the privilege of doing business here was supposed to be taxed. Now that's just a simplification of that issue. You can find most of that on some websites that, like 861.info, gives you a very, very detailed explanation as to why Americans that live and work in the 50 states, most of them don't have to pay the income tax. None of the money collected in income tax goes towards running the country. That's what everybody's thinking. But the truth is, it's going towards paying interest. What we need to do is stop the interest to the Federal Reserve. We can print our own money. Congress is supposed to print the money, but they've given that authority over to a private banking cartel. In simple terms, the IRS are bouncers for the club called the Federal Reserve. Think of it as a big club and a big organization, and the IRS are the ones that goes and breaks the knees of those who don't pay. So when it's owed back to this private banking cartel, the IRS goes out and collects from people to pay a private banking cartel. Statistics show me that my two children were born $86,000 in debt. And with the IRS and the Federal Reserve collecting $36 million an hour in interest from the American people, the rich are getting richer, the middle class is being wiped out. The last tax return that I filed was 1999. 2000 was the year that I discovered the information. And I've been asking the IRS over and over that if I'm required to file, I will file. If they were to answer the questions that I have about the income tax, and they show that I am liable to file, I will go back and file all those tax returns. I will get on a payment plan. I will get on every radio and television station that I've ever spoken on and go back and say, I was wrong. If I am liable to file, I will file. Doesn't matter what your religion is. Doesn't matter what your color is. It's going to affect all of us because the way the elite see it, they're up here and we're down here, and they want to keep it that way. They don't care about color. They got us fighting between, I'm a Democrat, you're Republican, you're black, I'm white. They got us fighting, and what we need to do is we need to get together. We need to sit down and figure out a way out of the cage that's being built around us.
Yale University is the third oldest institution of higher education in the United States. Located in New Haven, Connecticut, also home to the infamous Skull and Bone Society, which is part of the Zionist banking system. We take the bull by the horns and stop by the Federal Reserve and try to gain access for an interview. By the way, they haven't granted interviews for over 10 years.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the security asks us to leave.
Days go by like seconds. It's night and then it's morning. And with this world around us, soon it's gonna end. Oh, and when you stand before Him and look upon His face, what will be the excuse that you are going to say? What have you done for the kingdom? What have you done for the Father? What have you done for the one that you claim He saved? You go along every day, live your life your own way. You say that you are His, but in works you deny Him. Have you taken up your cross? Have you counted all lost? Are you trying to save the life you should have lost? What have you done for the kingdom? What have you done for the Father? What have you done for the one that you claim you saved? What have you done for Jesus, the Savior from your sins amidst the storm? He gave new life within, and what will you say? On that day, will He look at you and say to you, well done? Or depart, you are not my What have you done for the kingdom? What have you done for the Father? What have you done for the one that you claim you saved? What have you done for Jesus, the Savior from your sins amidst the storm? He gave new life within. What have you done? 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 For the King.